Welcome to Florida Focus, a college football podcast. My name is Brandon. I'm a lifetime Seminole fan.
And this is Chris and Jarad, and we are lifetime Gator fans.
We're going to take some time this week to recap Florida State's win over Va Tech. We'll talk about Miami, Georgia Tech. UCF travels to Kansas. But let's start, as always, with the Gators. Gentlemen, they're at home. They're victorious against Vanderbilt. Tell me your impressions on the game and what happened.
Last week we talked about, at least I said, this is a game that Florida needs to respond after getting manhandled at Kentucky. And I said, we have to win, and we have to win convincingly. Like, we can't just mess around. Because the fan base, a lot of the fan base, I should say, not all, was pretty upset. And there's a few that were like, oh, we need to fire Napier. And so you needed something like this. You needed at homecoming against a lesser team, a convincing win where you get some confidence, not only in the team but as the fan base as well. So the Gators win 38-14 over Vanderbilt, and a lot of it's going to be, the caveat is, oh, it's Vanderbilt, and I get that, I totally understand. But just when you go back a week and just you look totally inept in every phase of the ball. You want to have a game like this where you go out and dominate. And it was kind of a touch and go there towards the end of the first quarter. We were able to finally separate there. But overall, a solid win by the Gators there. ETN was out on offense, and Montrell Johnson stepped up, and it showed you why he is the starter. It shows you why he is so valuable to this team. He had 135 yards and a touchdown. Mertz continued to be efficient, 254. He had 3 touchdowns, and then Arliss Borningham, the tight end there, he had a couple of touchdowns and almost 100 yards receiving. And I know, Brandon, you're asking about, does Napier use tight ends? He wants to, if you can find the right guy. And hopefully this is the guy that fills that spot, because during camp he was the name that kept coming up, and we didn't really see anything yet. But
okay, so
good to see him. And then the defense was pretty solid, gave up some pretty big plays here and there, but you hold a team to 14 points, I'm not going to be upset. Special teams didn't wow you, but they didn't hurt us, so that's a plus there. So overall, a solid day for the Gators. Obviously, there's some stuff we got to clean up here and there, but you're down a couple of O-linemen, you're down your most explosive running back, and you still managed to dominate a lesser team. Because I view Vanderbilt on the same level of Charlotte, and we messed around with Charlotte. We kept it closer than it should have been. So it was good to see us separate from a lesser team, because we definitely needed that.
Yeah, Chris, I think you covered pretty much everything. So I'll touch on a few different, programming notes for the game there. One of the things that you continue to see in Gainesville is just the youth movement, right? So, you come out in 11 personnel at some point, and you had Pearsall, you had Borningham. I think Wilson was on there, maybe Gene or Douglas. Right there, you're looking at Borningham's a freshman, you got Gene who's a freshman, Wilson who's a freshman. And obviously Pearsall, your elder statesman there. But, the Gators continue just to not be afraid. Napier, I guess, continues to not be afraid to insert those true freshmen into those key situations. And even on defense, more of the same. Your highlight reels and your big plays continue to come from, some of your younger guys. Obviously, Princely had a phenomenal game there against Vanderbilt. But, and really and truly, when you look at the secondary, with Bryce Thornton, Jordan Castell continuing to come on there at the safety position. So both of those guys are looking pretty good. Thornton obviously stealing some snaps from Mitchell, throughout the game. And so that's something that I guess you would want to see, obviously, if you have a guy that's capable of that. And then really your weak link is Jason Marshall, which is, I think, shocking to every Florida fan. Really, it should be shocking to really every college football fan. Marshall was a pretty big name coming into the season, with expected to be kind of playing on that All-American level. We haven't seen that yet. So, really and truly, Kimber's doing a great job. Jaden Hill, I don't think you can say enough about what he's been able to do in the nickel and all year long. So he's played really well. So, you mentioned the score, you mentioned taking away from it. So I'll just kind of, comment on some of those things with just some of the Treon Webb, I think 70 yards. So I think he averaged over 10 yards a carry or at least 7.5, but I think it was over 10 yards a carry for him. So, pretty solid there too. So it was good to see him. And then you mentioned Boardingham's 2 touchdowns. So, the weapons are there, but they're very young. So I kind of expect to see some up and downs throughout the rest of the year as the competition gets better. But I think that those freshmen are getting some valuable experience. So it should be an exciting team to watch if Florida fans can sort of temper their expectations.
Yeah, it's funny you said that about the youth movement. I was at the game with my wife, and she follows, college football, a little bit there. Not to the extent that we do, but I kept finding myself throughout the whole game being like, oh, that guy, he's a true freshman. And that guy, he's a true freshman. See that huge defensive lineman? True freshman. And just like throughout the whole game, like I'm saying true freshman a lot because that's who we are. We are such a young team. And guys that are super young getting in important snaps. And you mentioned, I'm glad you brought up Marshall because he's one of those things that it's a head scratcher. You thought he was a solid anchor and okay, these young guys on the other side are might be your liabilities, but it's kind of flipped. And so kind of disappointed in him. All-American, maybe first rounder talk is kind of what you thought going into the year, and he's kind of took a step back. And Jaden Hill switching from corner to that nickel star position has been phenomenal for him, and seeing him grow in there. And Bryce Thornton taking away Miguel Mitchell's spot, which I'm happy with because I wasn't so sold on Mitchell, but also stealing Kamari Wilson's spot. Where was he at? Where he's a 5-star corner, true freshman last year, took over at the end of the year, looked like he was pretty solid, and I don't think he saw the field at all. And I'm just kind of I don't know if it's more on him, but also it's a testament to the guys that are playing, Castell and Thornton in the back there. So it's pretty cool, to see. But yeah, like you said, we're going to have up and down. We saw Jakeem Jackson get beat pretty bad. It was nice that he rallied, kept them out of the end zone. Another true freshman there. So you're going to have your ups and downs, but I do like the future definitely is bright, at least especially on the defensive end and also those guys, those offensive weapons as well. But yeah, I'm excited. But yeah, Gator fans do need to understand that they did solid this game, but the mistakes are going to come, and we're going to have some rough times. But it's really cool to see the young guys get in, and I love the fact that Napier is not afraid to play them, because that's one thing that Mullen and what's his defensive coordinator, Grantham. I mean, his senior guys would make boneheaded plays and miss tackles and just penalties left and right, and nothing would happen to them.
Well, you had Marco Wilson throw a shoe to lose you a game, and you made him a captain the next week.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of alluding to that, but yes, that's
wow.
No accountability, no discipline, and yeah. So I'm glad that he's no, if whoever's the best player is going to be on the field, and I like that.
So the last thing I'll say, I was obviously keep it short, but you mentioned my favorite sequence of the whole game. Jakeem Jackson goes and he gets beat deep, right? He's a true freshman quarter. He goes and gets beat deep, but he's phenomenally talented. The next 3 plays on that goal line stand, they throw at Jakeem Jackson, and he has 2 pass deflects and 2 pass defended, and then he just beats his man to stop the completion on the next 3 plays. So that was probably my favorite sequence of the whole game. I was just here's a guy who goes out, he gets beat deep, and then legitimately just redeems himself right there on the spot. They went at him all 3 times, and he's like, "No, you're gonna have to kick this field goal." So I thought that was really cool to see.
Yeah. So overall, I'm happy. It's a win, and I think this is really important because it gets you to 4 wins, right? And you're halfway through the season, and to get to 6, to get to a bowl, you need to find 2 more. Out of these 6 games, you need to find 2 more wins. Mm-hmm. We're still, like I said, a game ahead of what we were projected to be at. A lot of people thought we would be 3 and 4. I don't know the math, but so we're 4-2. So I'm happy about it, and I'll take it. But it was a important win, and you breathe just a little bit of relief there because I don't know about you, Jarad. You can speak to this, but going into this game, I was real worried it was going to be a lot closer than it ended up being. just because how bad. Like the last time I saw Florida play, we looked awful. So I was curious how we would respond, but I'm glad that we did the way we did.
I was probably a little bit more optimistic. I didn't think that we were gonna I thought maybe in the second half we pull away rather than the second quarter. So I was happy to see that, but no, it was good. I mean, obviously you're at home, and the Jekyll and Hyde of this team has been home and away. So you're gonna have to get one of those on the road, and it's a big road test. Some big road tests up ahead. So you mentioned needing to get 2 more, and they're not gonna come easy.
No.
So this week should be very interesting moving forward.
Yeah, just a couple of quick thoughts. I think that really outside of the really long touchdown, Florida's defense really kind of stood tall. Most people that look at the stats would be like, oh, the yards per play on Florida's defense were not so great. And I think, well, that's not really a good indicator of it. And the defense really kind of stood tall. You're right. You only give up 14. That's going to be a good day for anybody. What I noticed with Vanderbilt is they just can't capitalize when they have an opportunity. Only 1 of 10 on third downs, and they got decent yardage, but they just couldn't score. I'm curious, is that a victim, or is that an indicator, that Vanderbilt is a victim of not having key players, or do you think Florida's defense really kind of made that happen?
I think it's a combination of both. I think Vanderbilt's a team that doesn't have a lot of talent, and they got to take advantage of the things they get and be able to capitalize on that. You look at some of Billy Napier's comments earlier, and he's like, hey, when there's a play in front of you, you got to go make it. And I think that's kind of the situation Vanderbilt's in. They don't have the room for error or the margin of error to not make those plays and to not have those playmakers. So I think that's part of it. But then the second part of it is, Florida's defense has proven that at home they're very, very capable and very dominant. You look at what they were able to do to Tennessee's offense early on there, and that's a team that can really give you problems when they're on. The big question is that defense going to be able to finally figure it out on the road?
Yeah. One of the things that we finally got our second turnover on defense, and it was a key one too, because it was 7-0 us. I think we're driving down. We do like a wide receiver pass. It gets picked off, which I like the play. It was just he kind of floated it. And then like 2 plays later is that long bomb where Marshall kind of got beat there. And it's 7-7. We do nothing on offense, and they get the ball, and they're driving. And on 4th down, they convert a 4th down around our 30, and you're like getting real tense, like, oh, this is one of those games. But on that play, Searcy, DN, I believe, true freshman, forces a fumble, and we get the ball. And after that, we just took off. So, yeah, the defense needs to continue to make plays like that in key moments, and we're due for some turnovers. It's our only second. It's like 6 games. We only got 2 turnovers. We are due for some turnovers, and I think it's gonna happen. I can't see us getting just 2 more turnovers at the second half of the year. So I think the defense can step up, needs to step up, and will step up.
Okay, well said. Any final thoughts?
Nope. On to the next.
Okay. So we'll move on to the Knolls. Florida State's at home. They win pretty comfortably against Virginia Tech, and by very comfortably, I mean this game kind of rode in waves. Florida State takes an early 22-0 lead. They came out dominant, and Virginia Tech got stalled as we expected they would. The second quarter actually kind of went the Hokies' way, and then to start the third quarter, Virginia Tech returns a kickoff for a touchdown, and all of a sudden it's 22-17. I didn't really think there was room for concern here, but I was like, well, that's kind of allows us to not put in the backups and freshmen that we wanted to play as early on ahead of schedule. But, it still was a game where Johnny Wilson has 2 touchdowns, and it was clear they wanted to get first 2 touchdowns of the season, by the way. You got Trey Benson. He got a long touchdown run, another one earlier in the game, and then Toa Philly kind of rolled over some Lincoln logs to get in the end zone over like 2 defenders where his knee didn't go down. So, you had some fun plays. You had some experience there. You got to play some good experience on defense, and you got some freshmen involved in there. You also were able to kind of rest some of your stars off the bye week, like Bethune and one of our linebackers who's not 100%. Johnny Wilson kind of leaves the game dinged up, but it seems like a positive report. You do have this week where Winston Wright, a wide receiver, no longer with the team. And so he was kind of a guy of the Big 12 that transferred. You would have hoped for a little more production, but don't get anything there. Ken Coleman gets 2 return touches, and he kind of contributes there too. But when your running back goes 11 carries for 200 yards, not a whole lot of room to see concern when you just continue to dominate on the ground. So I'm just curious if you guys have any thoughts on what you saw from the game.
I mean, honestly, Brandon, it really kind of went the way I thought it would. I mean, we mentioned last week when we were so lucky to have Lynn on and kind of give us the history of that rivalry and kind of give us some in-depth analysis there. And really, you kind of look at Virginia Tech, and it really kind of went exactly how I thought it was. I mean, Jones, played admirably. I mean, there's a guy that was playing hard. He led the team in passing and rushing, obviously, in quarterback position. But it was just a team that never was going to have the firepower to be in that game. And then they weren't, right? And Florida State came in, and they were dominant. You mentioned Benson, and I thought that was a pretty big day for him. A guy that not necessarily hasn't looked dominant in the year, hasn't looked like running back one, right, in that offense. Came out and established himself early and often and was able to make some plays there. So, I mean, obviously, I think it's just another one of those cases. We say it all the time, but you win a game that you're supposed to win in a way you're supposed to win it. And so I thought it was, it was disciplined. There weren't a lot of, it wasn't sloppy. They look good. So, I think that's what you need to do to establish moving into that bye week.
Yeah, actually, it kind of went the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. I thought Florida State might come off a little bit sluggish there after their Clemson win in the bye week, but 22-0 in the end of the first quarter. That's the definition of starting off hot. So it gave them a little bit of a cushion for when Va-Tech did make their little bit of a run there. That they weren't too worried, and they finished out strong there. But yeah, this is kind of the game that they played like you thought they were going to play. The end result, at least, was they dominated. And this is what you want, right? This kind of like what Florida wants to, really, is you want to just establish a run game and just dominate in the run game so your quarterback doesn't have to pass as much. And I think Travis needs those games where he's not everything. He's not running around scrambling and doing everything. So he needs those games where, like, I can just hand it off and we're okay. So, yeah, good for them. They responded well. I wasn't really sure how they were going to respond, and they did just the way they needed to. And they got the first of 3 home games in a row. Mm-hmm. So that's good for them, and still in the driver's seat of the ACC.
Yeah, I think a couple of things that I've kind of nailed down as an identity for this team. I think the last 2 games, that's not true. I think just this game really for sure. It's pretty obvious to me that the whole idea of let's press Jordan Travis for a Heisman is kind of taking a backseat. And their focus is just, let's keep him healthy. Let's win the games we're supposed to. Let's win the ACC. It's not a bad thing. I mean, those are good goals to have. But I think the whole idea of, let's just keep him in the whole game was gone. That was evident with putting in Tate Rodemaker late. There was no need to risk any kind of injury there. This team is really not going to be great running between the tackles. So, I mean, I would look for some teams that can maybe put the pressure on, but it was obvious against Virginia Tech for sure they couldn't contain anybody on the outside. So that was something you didn't have to worry about or see a lot here. In this game, you did try to put Toafili running up the middle, which I've said all season long. He's really not a strength back to be given a bunch of touches, but he rushed for 50 yards, which is kind of high for him. So those are just some small things I see here and there. You give up a special teams touchdown, otherwise this game looks a lot different, and I'm not so sure on offense Virginia Tech actually gets to the 17 mark, and that's it's a pretty rough season for Va-Tech. They've got a lot of things to do and change, and heck, they beat Pittsburgh, so that makes me feel a lot more confident in my preseason. Like, Florida State might lose to Pitt. I highly doubt that now. So yeah, the Noles take care of business. They do some good things and they get some talent behind us. It was good to see like we forced some turnovers there. I mean, Jordan Travis still just has the 1 pick on the entire season, but he has thrown just a couple here and there that are balls that probably should have been picked. But honestly, that's not a problem you're going to have the rest of the season. I don't think he's going to put balls in danger. And so that's kind of a comfort. So yeah, they take care of business. And you're right. It's the first of 3 home games. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Noles over Hokies?
Yeah, you mentioned they gave up that return for a touchdown. Just overall, what is your assessment of the special teams so far? Because I know that's what you kind of you're the special teams guy, if anyone is. So what's your thoughts on them and so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see that Fitzgerald is really kind of a strength of your team. You haven't had to use him a whole lot this year. When you needed, hey, we kind of laid up and we didn't kind of cash in a touchdown, you're like, well, there's no reason to think he can't make a kick. He can extend the lead, and he's been doing that all season long. I mean, that for whatever reason, they decided to go for 2 after the first score. That's kind of fun. So you didn't need him for the extra point there. And the punting's been really good. I think there was only 1 or 2 punts this year where I was like, that went out of bounds too early, or we should have given less a chance of a return, but it hasn't really impacted us in a bad way. So yeah, it's a positive of the team. I'd give them a B or B plus so far.
Okay, good, much higher grade than ours for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Fitzgerald may not have some range. He's kicked some long ones, and that's how he kind of got over last season. But the Clemson game would have been a really good test of that. To like, hey, are we going to need a late field goal here to actually win this game and really make it? That would have told me a lot there. But we've been so efficient in getting touchdowns that we haven't put that pressure on him just yet.
Right, that makes sense. Okay, cool. Just kind of curious.
Yeah.
I follow ours, but I don't really follow yours as well. So
I would think out of the 3 aspects of the game, the defense is the one that I have a lot of questions about. And so for the Noles here, it's can we continue to improve and get some young guys involved? Will Cypress be able to cover on the outside? Will we have strength over the middle of the field? Can we continue to get pressure like on rushing teams? Jarad Verse is still a monster, and he flexed his muscles in this game too. You've got Patrick Payton on the other side. You've got some other guys coming behind him. So the defensive line, as long as Odell Haggins is a coach there, is never going to be a question mark.
Gotcha. Cool. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to start with we'll start with Chris on this one just for fun. UCF loses to Kansas. I'm going to give your initial thoughts on this one.
I mean, UCF is just finding out again. It's a little bit tougher to play in a bigger league. You were right. I mean, going into this season, Brandon, you were saying UCF is going to struggle, and I wasn't too familiar with the Big 12 outside of Texas, Oklahoma, to be honest. And I was like, no, they're gonna win some games. They're gonna win some games in the conference, and I was wrong, and you were definitely right on this. And just to 51-22, just going on the road and just losing really bad. And I mean, who is this team? Like, what is their identity? I know they wanted to be a rushing team, but I mean, I'm at a loss of words. I mean, they gave up almost 400 yards on the ground. I mean, that's kind of what we did to Kentucky, to that one player. But they go on the road to Kansas and just get blown out. And they start off pretty good, and you're winning 3 in a row, right? And then once they get the conference play, 0-3. And now you have to look forward, like, where are they going to get wins? Where are they going to get conference win? When's their first conference win going to come? Yep. I think the next game is like at Oklahoma.
Yeah, I can tell you it ain't going to be that one.
So no. Just another disappointing game from the Gus bus there.
I'll let you go, Jarad. And Jarad, we were talking about this already. I'm like, if you had to take a rushing defense, would you take Florida's on the road or UCF's in general?
Yeah, that's the the movable object meets the stoppable force right there. Type of argument. Man, what a rough day. And I look, just for all the Florida Focus podcast listeners, if I pick your team to win, expect to take loss. Okay. This is a game where I looked at it. You go to. I mentioned this ad nauseum. In the dumbest scheduling booking ever. UCF goes 2 weeks ago. They go to Kansas. They lose at K-State. They come home. They play Baylor, and they go right back to Kansas here to play this game. And I thought this was a game where UCF would get back on track and kind of surprise some folks and get a win. I just didn't expect them to go the 3 losses here because we've seen the flashes of what UCF can do when they're on. And, we've seen them play at a pretty high level, even without, John Rice Plumlee. I thought maybe this is a team that kind of benefits maybe from having that backup playing and like you're preparing for something different, maybe a little different style of football. So it kind of gives you something to think about from that aspect of it. And I thought maybe UCF would be able to kind of open things up and kind of play a little bit catch a little bit off guard at Kansas, but Kansas really kind of just proved that they're still not going anywhere, and they're still a really well coached team, and they were, and so all in all, man, that's just a rough day. My hat goes off to all the Knights fans. I think all of us have been there before, and just watched the game and seen a game where you're like, yeah, well, that was pretty terrible. And so I think we've all had that experience, and you get that in the college football world, and I'm not going to, kick a dog while it's down or beat a dead horse or anything. But, that maybe you're looking at the bright spot. I thought maybe RJ Harvey's your bright spot, ran the ball well, 133 yards, 8.3 a carry. I don't know. Plumlee was 3 of 7, Brandon? He didn't play a lot.
They tried to get him in to start and play the game, and it was clear he's not 100%, and so they pulled him. Yeah. He's just not right yet.
Yeah, and maybe he's not going to make up the difference in points even if he was healthy. Mm-hmm. But you I think you can take some of that back. Hey, we got our quarterback back. We can start to build on things. Kind of like Ford in the offensive line, it's tough to get some consistency and sort of build that familiarity if those guys aren't playing, right? So I think that Plumlee's just a guy that continues to need reps, and needs to kind of build that repertoire around that offense and what they're doing. So, yeah, a rough day there for the Knights. I'm with you guys. It's just kind of waiting to see that first Big 12 win. Obviously, I don't think they're going to go winless in conference play. I just think we might have to wait a little bit to see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, Brendan. Just real quick. I was a little bit surprised at the step back in their offense, but I'm really shocked in the step back in their defense. Now, Brendan, you follow it closer than I do. Is it just like attrition, or is it just playing a different competition, or what do you think the reason is their defense is just giving up so many points, or is it the fact that they're fitting in greatly with the Big 12 and the fact that they have defense? Like,
that's actually a valid point.
What is your assessment of their defense at this point?
So I think Jarad asked me a similar question a couple weeks back, and the UCF defensive philosophy for years has been, let's wreak havoc. That's going to be our number one priority. Let's try and get some tackles for loss. Let's try and deflect a pass. Let's try and force a fumble. And when you're doing that against guys that are just so much more mature and they're 20 or 30 pounds heavier than you, you just can't play that way and expect it to be successful. So that's one thing there. Second of all, this was the first time probably in the last 3 seasons I've seen UCF really start to get dejected and start to kind of give up. You're down 31-0. Your defense has given up everything. They go in the half down 24-0. They give up the first play of the game to start the third quarter was another long touchdown, like 75 yards. So at that point, you're like, geez, well, let's just play with reckless abandon at this point. Let's just try and get any kind of score we can. And so defensively, I just think they're outmatched at this point. You gave up in the same game, a guy ran for 90 yards, 130, and
150.
Gee whiz. And then you give up to Kansas State a 200-yard rusher. I mean, this is just asinine. This just can't happen. And it's ridiculous. Their quarterback only had to complete 8 passes to win this game. And this was like the biggest, did I see right? This is the biggest win for a conference game in Kansas history. Minus like maybe 2 points against somebody else, several years ago. So I think honestly the athleticism is starting to really catch up to UCF in this game, and their quarterback Timmy McClain, he's making too many mistakes and taking too many chances and doesn't know how to throw the ball away when he's being chased. Tries to force it and fumbles the ball away. He tries to put it in spaces he's not, it gets deflected, or he tries to be the hero, doesn't let his team and playmakers make the plays for him. So I think that was the biggest reason why UCF they got down and they couldn't catch back up.
I feel like I'm like carrying a flag for the UCF fan base, which is the wildest assessment in the history of probably the world, considering what I tweet from week to week about UCF. But on the podcast, I feel like that I've sort of been carrying this flag for UCF fans and saying, hey, guys, look, they take the positive in it and this is another week where I would even say, as insane or wild as it may sound, that like, look, season's not over. If you're a UCF fan, there's still a lot to play for. In college football and the NFL too, any level of football, if a team is able to run on you the way that Kansas was able to run, the way that Kentucky was able to run on Florida, like you can endure a quarter of that, maybe, a quarter and a half, maybe a half of football. But I mean, if a team's able to do that, like the psyche and the mentality of your football team is going to be shot at that point. And so that score is probably worse than what the Knights are capable of playing and the level they're capable of playing at, because once you're just getting physically dominated up front and you have basically given up 3 100-yard rushers in the same game, that's tough for any team. That's tough for any team to bounce back from. That's tough for any team, and I mean in the flow of the game, right? That's just one where you put it behind you. You don't even watch the film, right? Don't even put it on. Don't even take a look at it. Just game plan for the next week and move forward. And that's what I expect UCF to do. Put that one in the rearview mirror and just pretend like it never happened. I think that's what you got to do as a fan, and that's probably what the program's doing too. So, we still got a lot of games to play.
Yeah. Just real quick, looking ahead at the schedule, where do you think they get their first win? Home against West Virginia or like at Cincinnati or something after?
So the UCF fans probably don't want to hear this. It may be November before you get your first conference win. The good news is Cincinnati and Houston are known entities. Yes, they're all Big 12 teams now, but they played in the American for a decade. So those teams shouldn't scare you, and those teams should be kind of on the same level you are. I guess maybe technically BYU would be too, but you don't play them very often, and they're high on praising the Lord and stuff. So I wouldn't even. That's an outlier. But West Virginia would be a tough game at this point. It depends on how the Mountaineers do over the next couple of weeks. UCF does get a bye week, then they're at Oklahoma. Whew, that's a rough one.
Yeah.
But you do have a decent chance against Oklahoma State as well, although they did just beat K-State. That can be a little bit menacing. But for Oklahoma State to go on the road to an unknown, I really think it probably will be November.
Mm-hmm. Oklahoma State's an interesting pick there, Brandon, because Mike Gundy is basically Gus Malzahn. They're like the same person in that they can lose. Any game is losable. You look at certain programs, right, and you're like, man, that's a winnable football game. Or like, oh, we can probably stick in that, win that one. You're looking at Mike Gundy. What he does is you're looking at any game is losable. South Alabama, we could lose that game. University of Tulsa, maybe we lose that game. Just being around that program and being around that place in Stillwater quite a bit in my lifetime, I'm just here to tell you that that's not a team that's ever safe, right? They could be playing, HBCU, Division II, West Texas A&M. I don't know. They can find a way to lose any game, and that's kind of like Gus's MO too. So I think that's a game that you circle. Maybe you upset the Sooners. I don't know. Maybe Gus has like the game was. I don't know. I mean, that's also a game where like, oh, you could legitimately hang 80 on you.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, I think. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that like they can do that. Like that's a very dangerous football team.
Sure.
Yeah. I think Cincinnati is a really good. They have a good shot at beating them because Cincinnati's quarterback is Emory Jones.
Totally forgot about that.
Very beatable.
Very beatable quarterback. So
yeah.
I'm going to say Cincinnati. They get their first win.
Wide receiver 1 there is Xavier Henderson. So
yeah, also former Gator.
Not a threat.
Wow. No. Yeah.
Not a threat.
So I'm calling. They beat Cincy.
I like that one. And I mean, West Virginia's, we were talking about this off air, like they've had a decent comeback since about early November of last season. But if things go wrong and they get tired or they have some injuries in the wrong spot, Neil Brown, he may get caught at homecoming in Orlando and just be unprepared. So it's really hard to say. I mean, you look back at that Baylor loss now and you're like, geez, you really needed that one. And that may impact bowl eligibility at this point. But yeah, I'm going to say November. I think Cincinnati's a good pick. I think I'm going to jump on board with you, Chris.
Okay, good.
Let's see here. 1, 2, 3, 4. The intro to our podcast, by the way, is about 15 seconds. If you double that, is that about enough time for Miami to blow a lead and lose a game?
Yeah. I mean, to quote my daughter, what on earth? What on earth just happened?
I don't get it. And I think I said this earlier. That is not even arguably, that is the worst loss in ACC history. It's totally inexcusable. Please tell me you got a hot take here, Jarad. I mentioned for you to say it. Go.
Okay, look here. If you in your circle thought about the absolute dumbest play call in the history of play calls, this would still be more stupid. There's legitimately zero excuse for anything that happened in that last sequence of plays against Georgia Tech for the Miami Hurricanes. And here's what's even worse about it. It's not even the first time Mario Cristobal's done this.
Yeah.
Their offensive coordinator came out and was like, oh, it's on me. Like, no, it's not, dude. We've literally watched you do this at Oregon against Stanford. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. Like, there's no rationale. Like, this is like you're playing your buddy. You're playing your little brother in NCAA football. And you're like, you know what? Let me give him a chance here and, like, run the ball. And then, like, that's literally this decision. Like, there is no amount of coach speak. There's no amount of, like, debate. There's no amount of press conference that you could literally go into and explain this call. Because no matter what the answer is, hey, why did you run the ball here? No matter what you say, the answer is you're stupid. So, we always joke about it. We always joke about snatching a win from the jaws of defeat. Like that, they literally did that.
Yep.
Like, hey, I'm going to take a knee. No, I'm good. I just want to lose this game.
I mean, the fact that obviously that's the dumbest. And then you're like, it's 70 yards. There's no way we're going to let them get anywhere near a field goal. And then you just let them drive down the field. And the safety bit, I don't know if you saw the touchdown pass, the safety bit on the short. Give up the short. Give up the like. Why? Like the sequence of unfortunate events there, man. It was just a couple of years ago. I was watching Texas A&M and LSU play, like I don't know, Thanksgiving, whatever, and the game was over, right? Like, and I was nodding off. Game's over, so I'm like, good. I fall asleep. I wake up the next day and I find out that they had played 7 overtimes. Oh. Same thing happened this game. Miami is like scoring at the end, and I'm like, okay, good, I'm tired, I'm gonna go to sleep. And then I wake up to like middle of the night to text like Brandon, like, how did this happen? I'm like, how did what happen? Like, he said something. How does an ACC team lose? I'm like, oh, did Louisville blow that lead? Like, I was like, because it wasn't Miami. Miami couldn't have been that dumb to just let Georgia Tech back in. Oh, they were very dumb. Like, I don't understand. Like. So Jared's like, what's the rationale? The only thing, and this is just grasping at straws here. The only thing is that they weren't satisfied with the margin of victory, so they would maybe want to run and kick a field goal, and that's the only thing I could ever think of. Other than that, I'm not saying that is or it's smart, but other than that, like, what are you thinking? Like, what are you thinking? Just not put your knee on the ground and the game is over.
And before I turn this over to Brandon, sorry, Brandon, but I'm on the X app, right? And I'm seeing all these people, and they're being like, "Oh, well, he was really down. Okay, it shouldn't have been a fumble. Okay, maybe not. Maybe he shouldn't have been a fumble, but it was a fumble. But the fumble didn't end the game. You let Georgia Tech go 70 yards, 70 in less than half of a minute. Like." The failure of discipline in every level of play, in every coaching decision, is astronomical.
Yep.
Like, I mean, it's just unfathomable. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, you love to see it. But I love to see it. I have no love for the Canes. But, go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I'm going to set a little background here because this is a game low scoring, like nothing in the first quarter. Van Dyke struggles. Like, he throws 3 interceptions into a lot of traffic and a lot of decisions didn't make. You're like, this is not a good Georgia Tech team. Let's not forget Georgia Tech just came off a loss to Bowling Green. All right. Up until that last set of downs and that last drive, Georgia Tech barely had 100 yards passing the entire night. And when they got a turnover from Miami, they really couldn't capitalize. And despite all of that, they only had 17 points. They just really couldn't move the ball. Miami was making a lot of dumb mistakes. And what gets overshadowed is Restrepo had 12 catches for 144 yards. He had a really great game. Nobody's going to remember that from this game ever. They're going to remember just the dumb drive where Miami squeezes out a 20-17 lead, and you think, okay, they're going to salt it away. I'm like, are you trying to get this guy like extra yardage? Are you trying to keep him on the team because he's trying to lead? What is happening here? You even see like the commentators start to say it, like, why are we running here? I mean, you just take the knee here and the game is over. And in the back of your mind, if you think of a doomsday scenario, like, you liken it to NCAA football. If you're playing a video game, you're like, what is the only way somebody could win this game at this point? I was like, the only reason he's going to be running the ball here is to try and, get extra yardage or pad some stats. Just stupid. And then Cristobal doesn't even admit to his own mistake. In the interviews, he is like, oh, we teach too high, keep hands on the ball. He had to get forced out of the answer like, oh, we should have actually needed out. He at one point said we should have taken a timeout. I'm like, what are you talking about? None of this makes any kind of sense, and you're just dancing in circles around the fact that you can't own up to make a mistake, and your player's going to hate you. Players were throwing their helmets. You can read lips if you want. The guy was saying, like, What the F are we doing? None of it made any sense. None of it.
Well, I was going to say shame on us. At least Jarad and I, shame on us for jumping on the Miami bandwagon.
Right, yeah.
Because the second we get on the bandwagon, they buck us off. I mean, the second I'm like, oh, Tyler Van Dyke, he's a legit quarterback. He throws 3 picks. Shame on us. Like, it's just, we've seen this story before, yet we still fall for it. So, and didn't Miami a couple of years ago lose at home to an awful Georgia Tech team?
Yeah, they've had a propensity of doing that, and they were actually showing like an 05 game where losing to Georgia Tech at home also cost them a BCS bowl bid, and they struggle with this team for some unknown reason. And
here's a statistic, Brandon. Mario Cristobal has not won a conference home game.
What?
Look it up.
My goodness. That's incredible. I don't
It's
have
like
to.
the
I believe
opposite
you.
of us.
Exactly. It's the opposite of Florida. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Hasn't won a conference game at home.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
I mean, just that one fumble and then the losing in, 24 seconds. If they hold on, let's just say they take a knee in theory and win this game. Of course, we're not even talking about the game, really. We're just like, this is fine, whatever. They go to 5-0. Now you look at the rest of the schedule, you're like, they could lose 4 games.
Yeah. Well, I think we were always looking at that North Carolina game as like, okay, this is going to be the game where where rubber meets the road and we'll see what you're made of, but just an inexplicable loss here. And, I mean, what do you make of this happening twice? Like, I mean, I honestly want to know, like, what do you guys think about that? I mean, to see it happen one time and then to go back and be like, oh wait, we've done this before.
Mm-hmm.
We've danced this dance before. Like, what?
It's the ultimate head scratcher. It's literally like, it's as if they didn't want to win. I guess. Let's just say, hey, let's do this. From this point on, let's take every step we can to lose the game.
I really feel like the players, and you could visibly see it, and you don't see this very often, they had lost a lot of respect for their coaching staff right then and there.
Yeah.
To see them walk off the field like that, that's going to be a hard room to get back. That's kind of what I think moving forward is going to be Miami's biggest challenge, is for the players to say, we actually trust our coaches.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
If Van Dyke comes out and struggles, in the first half of a game or something like that, I mean, it's probably going to be in the back of your mind. Like, if this comes down to being able to outcoach somebody or make a late game decision here, are we going to trust the guys, on the sidelines to do it?
Yeah, and it's such a weird one because they haven't played anybody. I mean, I guess A&M, but of note. And we were giving them all the credit, like, okay, it's not a great schedule, but you're blowing these teams out, and just for them to just lay an egg like this, it just came out of nowhere. The fact that it was a close game, is a head scratcher, and then everything that ensued afterwards. Just nothing about this game made sense, and this is fitting right into my 2007 theory. It's fitting right into it, playing right into it. So thank you, Miami.
And I think to your credit there, Chris, the biggest thing comparing the 07 year to this is there's no dominant team, right?
Yeah.
Like really in the ACC, you were like, okay, it's kind of going to be a 4-way race. You got Florida State's a preseason favorite, shakily, just over Clemson. Then you got Miami coming in early in September and winning Texas A&M. But then all of a sudden, within 3 weeks, that's all just wiped away again. And so that kind of plays into that. I mean, you have the Pac-12 being strong, but Washington plays Oregon this weekend. We'll see who's the forefront after that game. And yeah, you just continue to see things that just make zero sense. Teams that lose games with a 99.99% probability. Come on. And I don't think, to your question, Jarad, about like this happening before with Mario, like you literally cannot blame anybody else. No one else. It is not on the players. It's not the players' fault for fumbling. It's not the defense's fault for allowing it to happen. It's all on him because you put yourself in that scenario 100%.
Yeah, I mean, what's the thing about coaching, right? You have to put your players in position to win, and he just, for some inexplicable reason, went into the settings and turned it to ultra hard mode and was like, hey, you know what? Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
So was it the offensive coordinator called the play? Or Cristobal called the play? Or did the offense, like, if the offensive coordinator calls that play for whatever reason, you as a head coach have to say, nope, we're just taking a knee. Like, ultimately it falls on him. Whether he called the play or not, he's still responsible, and all the blame falls on him.
Yep. I think, honestly, the offensive coordinator called the kneel down, and he just let it ride with the run. I really think that's what happened. I don't know if that's 100% confirmed, but that's what I've heard, which is even more insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, tough loss, Canes fans.
Yeah, and what if? And then at what point, if you are Van Dyke, where you go, now screw this, I'm taking a knee, like
right?
Like, would you like? I wonder what's going through his head. Like, coach said to do this dumb play.
It's just there was a game a couple years ago. Real quickly, Jarad. It was Nebraska. This is back when they had a Pelini head coach. Whatever, and they're driving down late, and they complete a third down pass, and it's fourth down, and to conserve time, he's like, spike it, and the quarterback is like, what? So he spikes it, and they lose the game. I'm like, yeah. I guess in the heat of the moment, you're like, I gotta trust the coach. Right. Go ahead, Jarad.
Maybe.
I was just gonna say, like, everything doesn't seem so dumb. Obviously, I didn't play at the collegiate level, but like, everything doesn't seem as dumb until it is dumb, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, all right, I was just gonna inexplicably hand the ball off here. Seems weird, but okay. And then all of a sudden, fumble, then all of a sudden you're like, nightmare scenario. So, I mean, I think in Van Dyke's kind of defense is like, maybe he's thinking coaches just want to get a look at, the defense against the offensive line in this situation, or I don't know, but maybe Van Dyke's just kind of like, all right, well, weird, but okay.
I definitely don't blame him one bit. I'm just kind of curious, like, what's in his brain at that point? Mm-hmm. Like, are you sure about this? But I trust you. But it kind of gives me a little bit more respect for Napier, because sometimes his play calling is rather conservative when he has the lead. And I'm like, okay, because he's just like, I just want to win. I don't care how we win and what it looks like. I just want to get out of here with a victory. A little bit. Sometimes it's still frustrating sometimes, but a little bit more respect. Like, okay, you just want to, you're looking at the analytics. You just want to get out there with more points than the other team.
Yep. Another small note on that last drive for Miami is, and I forget the exact numbers here, but they weren't running the play clock down to 0 either. They were still snapping the ball with like 10 to 5 seconds left.
Yeah.
So let's just say doomsday scenario, you did run that last play and fumbled it. You would have left them with like 8 seconds. Mm-hmm. If you had done, just a couple small things right leading up to that last play. And I mean, even just the idea that they scored, 27 seconds or whatever it was, is just crazy. But if it had been like, oh, you only get the ball with 8 seconds left, then you're like, okay, well, then you would have tried what Miami did in the last play, which is just chunk it backwards 15 times and hope for a miracle. Just unbelievable. Like, it wasn't even one play. It was just multiple. Just management on the entire last drive was just bad.
Yeah.
Woo. What a game.
when I saw that, because I was back home watching this, I just started laughing uncontrollably for about 15 minutes. I just couldn't believe. My wife's like, "What's going on?" I was like, I just love the sport. I just love it.
I was just thinking the whole time, I was like, there is not a program in the country that can out Miami's ability to be Miami. I was like, they have cornered the market. And, the business is alive and well. So bad for them, or good for whatever.
Yeah. Great for
Good
us
for
as
us.
fans.
Good for us, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd, Chris, remember that episode we did a long time ago, the plays that haunt us?
Yeah.
I think Miami has a new number 1.
This is going to top it.
Yeah, that's great.
Gonna top it.
We should get you back on that one, Jarad. That was a fun one.
Yeah.
I have some thought.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, that'll wrap up that week. We can move forward now and kind of look at what's the week to come. Florida travels to South Carolina. Tell me what's your thoughts playing the Gamecocks.
So I'll start off with this because when we were predicting the games before the season, I predicted that we would lose to South Carolina, and I said we're going to get blown out by South Carolina. And halfway through this season, we have learned a couple things about Florida, and one of them is that in two road games, we are awful, right? So we're going on the road again, and it's not like we lost on the road, which was not unexpected, but the way you lose was just, embarrassing. And so here we go on the road again. So this has a recipe in my mind for another blowout. One, we're on the road. It's been said, away from the swamp, where Napier's 1-7, and of those 8 games, maybe 4 of them were competitive. Our last 3 games away from the swamp, the bowl game got embarrassed, Utah got embarrassed, Kentucky got embarrassed. So, we're going on the road again. We have a little tiny bit of success. We played well, so you know how we do with success. We fumble it. And South Carolina just had a bye week. So I don't feel good at all about this game. But there are some positives, and I will talk about it there. There is some hope. But, I don't feel – this is one of those games where, like, on paper at least, we should get beat. Hopefully all the talk that Napier and the team has about being better on the road and handling success, hopefully that could translate into something good. And as they say in like politics, there is a path to victory. There are ways we win this game. And I think South Carolina is like right on our level as far as a team goes. But, just the fact that we're on the road against a team that just had a bye week and we have a tiny bit of success, I'm not looking forward to this game too much. What do you think, Jarad?
You mentioned path to victory. I think you're going to have to be able to pressure Rattler. Rattler's the guy who hasn't had a great season, but it's not necessarily because of him. He still looks like, he has the ability to play, but his offensive line is really bad. It's not giving him much time back there to kind of work. So I think this is a game where you're going to really have to be able to dial up pressure and kind of keep South Carolina off balance, take advantage of some of the issues they're having up front in the offensive line. And then you're just going to have to establish the run and against a team that knows that you want to run. And that's going to be the MO for Florida kind of going forward, but especially in this game. But can you stay on schedule with first and second down? And if Etienne's not available to you, can you be efficient? Can Mertz continue to be efficient enough? And maybe maybe instead of a 5-yard run, it's a first down pass, or a first down pass for 5 yards or 6 yards, or maybe it's a swing or something in the flat to get you 3 or 4 and keeps you in positive position for second down. So that's kind of where we're at. I don't know that many people should be confident in Florida going on the road, because I think now you're in a, you got to see it to believe it type of situation, right?
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I think the faith in it maybe is kind of past, right? But there's still a belief that can come once it's finished and once we've seen it. So Yeah, I'm probably not uber confident in this week, but like you mentioned and like I mentioned, if you can set the tone defensive up front and you can stay in second short, third and short, then it should be a game down the stretch.
Yeah. So I want to so Rattler we know is a talented quarterback there, and you mentioned the offensive line struggles, but just if you compare his stats to Mertz, and obviously they're playing different teams, but Mertz has more yards, Mertz has more touchdowns, and Mertz has less interceptions. Now, going into this game at the beginning of the season, I didn't think that would be a thing. So if Mertz continues the consistency that he has, if we establish the run we are a running team, that's what we want to do. I think that we definitely have a shot. And South Carolina's pass defense has struggled this year. So if the run game isn't working, I think we have a chance at success there. Hopefully Borningham continues his success there. And it's good to have Wilson and hopefully Etienne will be back there. So there's a chance of we winning. Can we handle the other stuff? Can we handle traveling on the road? Can we handle the crowd? Can we handle the stadium going nuts when we make a mistake? Like, how are we going to bounce back? Like, how do we handle those things? Because I think on the field we match up good with South Carolina. It's just the other stuff that really concerns me.
Yeah, I think Brandon and I agree on this, and Chris, I'm sure you do too. But I know for a fact that Brandon and I have talked about this, and Mertz isn't going to lose you a game. I think we've seen that, right? He's not going to give the ball away a bunch of times. Yeah. But the issue is that he's not going to He's also hasn't been a guy that's going to go out and get you a win. And this may be a game here in South Carolina where, like, down the stretch in the third and fourth quarter, he has to do something to go get you a win. And until we see that, man, if you're not carrying a 10-point lead into the fourth, it's going to be a little sketchy. So that's just kind of our thought. Is that kind of where you're at, Brandon?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. He's definitely, like, just to compare him to on the Noel side, Drew Weatherford was kind of the quarterback for us like that. He wasn't going to be anything great. He had a decent freshman year, but after that, you're like, he's just going to take care of the ball, and he's not going to do anything spectacular. And then to your point, Chris, the surprising part for me for South Carolina is their secondary should be the strength of their team, and for them to see them struggle like that is just kind of different and weird. And it started with week 1, they played North Carolina, which is a pretty good team. They're probably going to, I would think, finish second in the ACC and go to the title game. But yeah, also the offense for South Carolina hasn't been consistent, and Rattler hasn't been the Heisman hype quarterback that you were hoping he would be when he came to Columbia. So I'm not going to really give a prediction on this game score-wise. I am going to throw out an interesting prediction, though, that you're only going to hear from a guy like me. South Carolina will score a special teams touchdown in this game.
Okay.
Right. They have a really good punter.
Last year against us.
Did they? Okay.
Yeah.
I know we talked about Florida struggles in special teams, but one of the best punters in the country. He's actually completed 6 passes in his career, 3 for touchdown. So watch the fake somewhere. Yeah.
Their lone touchdown against us last year was the punter.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah. So
that's nuts.
No, that's a good point because we talked ad nauseum about our special team struggles, and we know that Beamer special teams is in his blood. So yeah, that's another thing. I really think you'll know I think by the end of the first quarter whether we're going to win or not. Because the 2 road games, it was over by the first quarter. Yeah. Tennessee was kind of that way too. It started off awful for us, but we rallied. I think a lot of that had to do we were at home. So I think you'll know pretty quick whether we came to play or not. So that hopefully we do. I'm very doubtful we will, but I hope that they prove me wrong.
Gotcha. I think I don't know if we'd pick teams to win. I think I'll take South Carolina to win this one. It's going to be a show me game too, but I'll take the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I would. I'll go Gamecocks as well. I want to say Florida because I like our matchups, but again, Jarad mentioned, until it happens, I'm not gonna pick it.
Fair enough. Any final thoughts? Or are we good to move on to the Florida State Seminoles?
No, let's talk Noles.
Hosting Syracuse. Syracuse started off with a pretty soft schedule, and the 4-0 start shouldn't really impress anybody too much. I mean, Colgate's one of those wins, and they did beat Purdue. That's a decent one. A game where they ran their quarterback Schrader quite a bit more than you thought. So I mentioned that because Florida State may see a lot of running quarterback in this game, just like kind of drones with Va Tech, but Syracuse will do it better. And that's probably not a good sign for Syracuse. The reason being is they would rather rely on a running back or the passing game to get some more yardage down the field, and I just don't think that's the way they're going to get it done. Florida State, I've kind of seen some trends on the offensive line that concern me, like, and I'll give credit. There's a podcast Jason Staples does. It's called Unconquered. He said, like games against like Clemson, for instance, you will see linemen kind of sneak back in their formation before the snap to say, oh my gosh, they're going to pull on the left side. He's giving away the play. He's tipping his hand. And I think those are the kinds of things you have to clean up this week. When you look at some of the other, like I talked about, rushing up the middle, and maybe we're just not that team, so we shouldn't try it too much, but you do want to kind of give a good, better look of your offense so you're not always running the same plays over and over, I think. And I would like to see that against a defense like Syracuse, and I think that's good we can do it. Syracuse has looked pretty bad the last two games. They lost to Clemson pretty badly, and they also was the other loss? Was it North Carolina? They just look pretty bad, and they give up 40-plus points, or 40 to UNC, I think 34 to Clemson, and they just look pretty bad in aptitude. They look kind of lost. And I probably think that's what happens again in this one. I think that Florida State kind of rallies some of the wide receiver core, gets something done. They kind of give Syracuse a different look, but I don't think Syracuse has enough horses to keep up.
I agree here. Schrader is who he is. I think, he's thrown like 5 picks on the year. I think he has like 6 or 7 touchdowns, maybe 8. But, I just don't think I agree with you 100%. I just don't think Syracuse is going to be able to keep up down the stretch. I think this is kind of a game where Jordan Travis puts it away. I don't say early, but, Jordan Travis is probably, on the sideline hanging out most of the fourth quarter, I would think. In this one, I just don't see it. I think he'll come in, get the job done early, and probably call it a day. I think it'll look a lot like Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to that. I was kind of curious how Florida State would respond to all the other games they played early in the year and more meaningful games, if you will. And they handled Va Tech well. I think they're going to handle Syracuse well because Syracuse, they're two like legit opponents. They got blown out. This is another legit opponent. So I have zero concerns as far as Syracuse putting up a fight against Florida State.
Gotcha. I have nothing else to add, really. Just a question as Gator fans, since you're on the outside looking in. As you probably know, the ACC decided to go with 3 permanent rivals in the conference and then rotate the rest. What are your thoughts on the fact that Syracuse is one of the 3 for Florida State?
I thought it was interesting when I was kind of looking down the line. But I thought it maybe might make sense too, right? So if you're looking at locking in opponents, you always kind of look at like the balance of it. And, I thought Syracuse was interesting, but I also thought it was kind of that like give me scheduling in that, like, I'm not saying Syracuse is like completely off or has no chance, to build that program up. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I feel like that they were more of like a balance edition, if that makes sense at all.
Okay.
So that's kind of how I looked at it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know how these teams are going to look, 5-10 years down the road. But right now, yeah, you need that. If you're going to have these tough ones, you're going to balance it out exactly with a team like Syracuse. I think it's going to be great for basketball. I don't know if basketball works the same way, but I mean, at first your knee-jerk reaction is like, that team is so far away from Florida State. Why is that? But no, it's a good point because I think Clemson is your other Clemson and Miami.
Correct.
Yeah, you got to have, because I mean, Florida State would be, understandably livid if it was UNC, as your third. So it makes sense.
Yeah, me personally, I don't think you needed to keep the Clemson game every year, just to be truthful. But what do I know? They started releasing teal uniforms instead of garnet and gold ones, so they didn't ask me about that either. So, 2 things I didn't really agree with. But, Georgia Tech is always the team I thought made the most sense. Because believe it or not, geographically, they're the closest team. About a 5.5 hours drive, and Miami's 8, just to compare. So nobody else is really close. And then also, for a long time. We were in the same division as Boston College, so you have to fly there. There's no other way. You can't drive for 3 days. So, anyway, that's just a side tangent because there wasn't anything else I had to add to the game. So, thanks for the input.
Yep.
Okay, UCF is off, and then Miami does have to play another game, and they're at North Carolina, which I think, did I see this is still a ranked matchup? Is that correct?
I don't know where Miami landed, man.
Yeah, they're 25.
25, okay.
Just barely. Okay.
So 14 versus 25 here?
Yeah.
So, North Carolina was a team that I don't know that North Carolina is a team I've been high on. Drake May is a player I've been high on for the past couple of years, right? He's a guy that I've talked about a lot. And then I probably even mentioned him on the show a couple of times. My preseason take on Drake May was that I didn't know that North Carolina was going to be able to play well enough around him for him to kind of like make a legitimate run at the Heisman. And North Carolina has played pretty well around him. They've found some playmakers there. Their defense is pretty solid. And Mac Brown continues, at 137 years old to be pretty effective in building a staff and putting a quality team together and, building a culture there. So, yeah, I think I'm pretty excited to watch this game. Obviously, a huge bounce back game if you're Miami against a very quality opponent. North Carolina comes in undefeated, or I guess you go there. Is it?
It's at UNC.
Yeah. So there you go. I mean, it's a night game. It should be a good one. I think Drake May looks great here, and Van Dyke's going to have a chance. May's only thrown like 8 touchdowns in the year, but against four interceptions. So Van Dyke's actually, against a much worse schedule, put up some numbers here. So it should be fun to watch. I think May's probably going to be able to take advantage of this defense, though. So I kind of do look for North Carolina to probably get this W.
Yeah, well, if you're North Carolina, all you got to do is let Miami have the lead, and they'll do the rest. No, but for real though, I'm curious how Miami responds to this. Like, do they just fold, crumble? I don't think anybody's given them a real chance to actually win the game. But I mean, in true Miami fashion, this is the game where they would do something like that. But May is having a pretty decent season. I didn't think it would be. I thought it would be a little bit better at this point, but it's still solid. Jarad made a good point. It's not just him. The team itself is much better, more sustainable than in the past. But if you're Miami, you gotta you gotta find your identity, find out do you trust your coaching staff? Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the hardest jobs right now is that coaching staff, getting them up for this. I still think North Carolina wins, but I'm very curious to see how Miami responds.
Yeah, does Van Dyke clean up the interceptions? I mean, he'd only thrown 1 going into Georgia Tech. Now he has 4. He was able to get 20 points out of, I think, 38 pass attempts, and despite a really terrible game, they had to lead very, very late. And I think Miami has a really good shot in this game. Despite the fact that they lost to Georgia Tech, they did outplay them. They did have a lot of things going for them. It's just, are we away from home? We're going to play better? Are we going to rebound? Are we going to show people we have something to prove? Those are the questions I want answers to. And to clarify both your points, especially Jared's about UNC's defense. Yeah, last year their defense was just atrocious, and they just gave up everything you could imagine. But they got some transfers in, including a guy from Florida State. They kind of cleaned up some things, and since week 1, the Tars have shown they're kind of mean business, and that's kind of refreshing to see. The ACC kind of needs a team like that. Oddly enough, I really kind of want to take Miami to win this game. I'm just not going to do it. Give me UNC, but is Vegas something I know I don't? No, it's something that I don't, because it says that UNC is only a 3.5 point favorite at home.
Well, I was going to actually ask you about that. Do you think that Georgia Tech – so in the college football world, as both of you are very aware, this is a very, what have you done for me lately sport. And by lately, we mean 3 days ago. So, is this a situation where we're maybe as a country or maybe, as fans, overreacting to the Miami Georgia Tech game? And so maybe we're overreacting to that and kind of negating some of the takes here. And maybe that's why, it probably will be a close game.
It's a very good possibility. You take away those last 3. I mean, Miami did have some things going, but they did play a bad game too. I think you might be right, Jarad.
Or like Chris always talks about, Chris, is this a look ahead? Was Georgia Tech the look ahead game?
Mm.
Yeah, could have been, because they've had some easy ones that they handled just fine. And with Miami, nothing makes sense. So it would make perfect sense for them to win this game. So I don't know if I'm going to go be that bold and say they will, but I wouldn't, honestly, I would not be shocked if they came out and win, because that would just make sense. That would just be perfect for them.
I think I would stick with UNC. I think I think North Carolina is talented enough to play. Like, obviously Miami has a lot of athletes, right? They have a lot of speed on the field. They're very capable, even on defense. They have a pretty good defensive line. And I think that if North Carolina can match up with that, which I think they can, and it comes down to just coaching decisions, I'm going to take Mac Brown over Mario Cristobal. So I think that I would probably lean to North Carolina, just because I think I have a lot more faith in Mac Brown to, I guess, be consistent down the stretch. And he's managed, he's obviously won a national title, so he knows a thing or two about, pressure decisions. So I'll probably take North Carolina over Miami, because I'll take Brown over Cristobal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. He also knows a thing or two about AARP. Anyway, so Miami playing North Carolina is an interesting matchup. So let's, in your minds, gentlemen, let's rewind the timetables 1 week, okay? Mm-hmm. Florida State, hot start, top 5 team. Miami undefeated, right? If you were looking at the rest of the season, it's very clear 2 things were possible before Miami lost to Georgia Tech. The first one is that Miami is going to control who plays in the ACC title game. Miami plays UNC, Florida State, and Louisville. Those are the top 4 teams in the conference, and Miami I would include in there. So, again, this is all a week ago. Florida State actually can have a sigh of relief, because before Miami lost to Georgia Tech, follow me here for a second, there was a possibility Florida State goes 11-1, with that one loss being to Miami, and doesn't go to the ACC title game. Don't play Louisville. Louisville may go undefeated the rest of the year in the conference play. When they played Notre Dame, we knew going in Louisville's schedule was pretty weak, and they don't play any of the big teams. So Miami unwittingly did Florida State a favor, I think, by losing that game.
That's a very interesting point you make, because I did not realize that Louisville didn't play anyone. Well, I didn't realize that anybody at Louisville didn't play another contender, I guess, is what I would say.
I think they play one of the top 4 teams in the conference, and I think it's UNC.
I don't think they play. I think I could be wrong. Look this up, but I'm pretty sure that there could be a scenario where UNC, Louisville, and Florida State all go undefeated.
Correct, because we don't play each other.
Yeah,
but we all play Miami.
Wow,
that's crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess what's on the line here, and to your point, if North Carolina is able to knock Miami off here, I mean, likely puts them out of ACC contention altogether, regardless if they beat Florida State or not.
Correct. Right. And that would mean Florida State can probably, if we were to slip up against Miami, and they're still a pretty good team, and I would think they get better by the time we play them in November. If somehow we were to slip up at home against them, it wouldn't be the end of the world, and we still have a shot at the title.
Could Miami be the one that loses to UNC and just wrecks havoc in the ACC?
Yeah. Wheel of Destiny.
Ruins everybody's. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense.
Yeah. It's interesting because the ACC has been pretty good on the top part, but on the bottom part's been bad. Like, Georgia Tech lost to Bowling Green. Northern Illinois beat Boston College. Vaught Tech lost to Marshall. So, like, the bottom half is looking pretty awful, and then the top half, you're like, okay, these are pretty good teams. We have some good out of conference victories. It's kind of hard to figure out where we're at. Is it somewhere in the middle? Is it the top half, the bottom half? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So what a season!
Yeah. Thanks for the ACC talk, gentlemen. More than we expected. Let's see. Yeah, UCF's off, so that'll cover it. Any final thoughts on this week or what we're looking at moving forward?
The only final thoughts I would have is, there's some big recruiting battles going on in the state. LJ McCray, 5-star defensive end, just came off his official to Florida State this past weekend. Georgia and Florida still seem to be the favorites for that signature. but maybe Florida State can sneak in there after the visit. We'll see. So that should be one to follow. Jordan Seaton, 5-star offensive tackle at IMG Academy, obviously taking his official visit to Florida last weekend. That's a guy that should be fun to watch down the stretch because nobody knows what he's going to do. He's had official to Oklahoma that he canceled. I think he took one to Tennessee, maybe Colorado. So that should be fun to watch. But those are two big-time in-state, line of scrimmage commits that, people should keep their eyes on.
I was going to say thank you, Jarad, sincerely. I appreciate the recruiting updates you give us, and I think I personally forget to ask those because I get so wrapped up in the week to week, and that's the show behind the show, right? Is what happens with all of these recruits and who's going where, and so please interject that more. We would benefit from that greatly.
Sure.
Yep. All right, and Chris, we've been doing this for a long time now. Let me just remind the fans one more time where they can reach out to us if they have opinions on our show today.
Hey, just stroll on down to FloridaFocusPodcast.com.
There you go. All right, gentlemen, it's been a great week. Looking forward to how the rest of the season plays out. This is Brandon saying, "Go Noles."
This is Chris.
And Jarad.
Go Gators.